Well, happy November, you guys. And this year just continues to be very interesting to me. As you know, this last weekend was Halloween, and we had a fantastic time. Lots of trick-or-treaters. Everyone in the neighborhood had something set up, which was so cool. They were sitting in their driveway, but they had like a candy bowl set in front of them so people could come get candy, and everyone was able to maintain the 6 feet of distance and all that good stuff. It was really fun. And then I get a call from my mom this morning, and she lets me know that Glasgow has made like the news because somebody thought it was a great idea to wear a KKK outfit for Halloween in Glasgow, Montana. And the customers actually voted this person as the best contest. So they won the Halloween costume contest, and it even made it to TMZ. I'm blown away by the guy who called this out in a post, and the post went viral. And I think it's so incredible how people are standing up against the racism, because I know how hard that can be to do in such a small town, especially when everybody knows you. And I know that town because I grew up there. So I know people are probably being very cruel to the guy who called this out. I don't think he had any idea that the post would go viral. However, it did. And I just think it's pretty amazing, the strength and the example he's setting for people to stand up when you see something that's wrong. I'm also blown away in a sad way by how many people are defending the costume or saying like, oh, it's not a big deal or da-da-da. Even one person said only 5 or 6 black people live here. And I'm just thinking, imagine what those 5 or 6 people are feeling, are experiencing. And he's like, oh, they just laugh with us. Ha ha ha. Well, what else do you do in that situation when you're surrounded by racists? I mean, you need to survive. I can't imagine he leaves those interactions, though, feeling accepted and seen. And it makes me think about a post that I saw Loki Mulholland post a couple days ago. And he said, if you have a black friend and you don't understand their pain right now, you don't have a black friend. You simply know a black person. And I think we can add this to all just people of color. If you don't understand or have compassion for people of color when racism happens or racist acts happen, even when somebody thinks they're being funny, then you don't have a friend in that person, or they don't have a friend in you. Like maybe you think they're your friend, but they do not see you as a friend, right? So how we respond to situations like this, like people are watching. Like I know I'm watching, and for me, if somebody is sympathizing with or justifying or making excuses for someone else's behavior that is racist, that's not someone I want to keep close to me because I want to protect my family. So I just thought that was really interesting. So, and sad to me. So anyway, just a reminder to you that sometimes the hard thing and the right thing are the same things. And it's okay to let people in your life know that something they did is hurtful and harmful, and help them do better in the future. I'm Steph Prehamas. I am the host of the Beautifully Changed podcast, and I am delighted to have you here. Thank you for spending some time with me, and my goal is for you to take something away from this episode that you can start applying to your life today, and just know that you have value in just being who you are. Today's guest is a friend of mine that we've just been communicating on Instagram, and he's such an incredible guy. And I thought, you know what, he would be really interesting to have come on as a guest because he is a meteorologist and a photographer who travels across the United States chasing and documenting storms. Like, how cool is that? And he has these beautiful pictures, and His personality is just very compassionate and warm and loving and adventurous. So, ladies, if you're interested, he is single. So, he's worked on 3 television stations, including the Weather Channel. Now he does freelance work, and this allows him to travel exactly when and where he desires. He relocated from the New York area to Oklahoma in order to be close to the storm action. And I'll tell you, I lived in Oklahoma City for a year with Keone and Makayo, and I can definitely say the storms there are pretty epic. So, seems like a good location to go to. And so, we just talk about his journey, the lessons he's learned, and just where this passion comes from, and just get to know him a little bit more. So, without further ado, here is Quincy Vagell, and yours truly, enjoying my conversation with him. And real quick, it would be super awesome if you went and left me a review. I would love that. It helps more people find this incredible podcast, little community of self-growth and enhancing ourselves so that we can have incredible relationships. Also, if you would like to experience some self-hypnosis meditations, definitely check out my YouTube channel, Beautifully Changed, to really dive into your mindset work, and you can do it comfortably from your own home. Or if you would like anything personalized, go ahead and send me an email at stephanie@beautifullychanged.com. Okay, much love to you, and thank you for the review ahead of time, because I know you're awesome, so you're going to leave me one. And now here is Quincy and I. Well, hey there, Quincy. Welcome to the Beautifully Changed podcast. I am so excited to have you on as a guest today.
Hi, Steph. Yeah, it's great to finally be on the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited because first of all, I just love following you on Instagram because your photos are incredible. And then the more I just get to know you, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're such a great human. And I, of course, am a huge fan of all amazing humans. So I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was interesting. I found you through one of my friends who we have in common, who lives in North Dakota. And I remember I had moved to Oklahoma, and she said, well, we were in Oklahoma City for the year. And she said, oh my gosh, I follow a storm chaser that I think lives in Oklahoma. And I think she knew, but I'm just trying to remember the conversation. But anyway, she was like, he lives in Oklahoma to chase like tornadoes or whatever. And she's like, here, I'll give you his handle so that you can follow him. And yeah, so I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And which kind of leads me to ask you, what came first, photography or storm chasing?
So that's actually a very good question. I was interested in weather and meteorology from a very young age. As early as even in second grade, I had in school, I was writing in journal entries about weather, which is pretty crazy. But also at the same time, I was always interested in photography. The storm chasing thing didn't come along until I was an adult. So it's kind of interesting. They kind of had parallels where I like to do photography, I like to study weather, and then one day eventually it kind of just came together.
That's amazing. So what is it about the storm chasing or the storms in general that kind of call to you or speak to you in a way?
Well, I'll go back again to when I was younger, and when if there was a lightning storm or a thunderstorm, I always wanted to go to the window or even run outside, and I think I was just fascinated by nature, just kind of watching it, just awestruck, right? Watching the clouds go by, lightning striking, thunder in the distance, just anything like that really captured my attention. And then I think as I went along and studied it more, I became even more fascinated. So at first it was just a fascination by, oh, look, there's a storm. But then later on, as I studied more of the scientific background, I wanted to know more about why do storms form, where do they go? And then it kind of turned into me chasing storms. So it's been kind of an interesting evolution over time.
Yeah, that really is. And I got to tell you, so I grew up in Montana. So I remember sitting on the back and like in the backyard with my dad watching the thunderstorms or the lightning storms when they were there. And it is really beautiful. But when I moved to Oklahoma City, and Garth Brooks is from Oklahoma, right? That area. And he has that song Thunder Rolls, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, the thunder in Oklahoma is way different than thunder I'd ever heard anywhere." Was that your experience when you moved to Oklahoma from like the East Coast? Did you realize, or was it different for you, the thunder there? Because for me, I was like, "Holy cow, the thunder is so powerful here."
Well, I think part of it is because the land is so open, the sound waves
Mm.
just they just travel. Whereas as opposed to whether you're on the East Coast or if you're in the Rockies, like up in Montana, the ground and the trees absorb the sound. So it's really a really loud crashing sound. And part of it too with Oklahoma, based on how the atmosphere works, I won't get too technical with it, but because there's so much instability in the atmosphere, you get these really, really intense storms that you don't really get in almost anywhere in the world. It's almost like it's an epicenter for it. So it's definitely a different type of storm around here.
Yeah. Okay, good. So it wasn't just my imagination. I'm glad to know that there's actually some science behind it because I was like, whoa, the thunder here is wild and the storms and all the lightning and everything. So it does seem like the perfect place for a meteorologist who loves to chase storms and photograph them to end up.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a really great. Oh, go ahead.
no, no,
Sorry.
you go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Oklahoma is it's a pretty central location. It's pretty much almost in the center of what we would call Tornado Alley or storms. But as a storm chaser, I do travel, and it's funny you mentioned North Dakota because I've chased a few storms in North Dakota, but it's not really known for storm chasing because their storm season's a little more sporadic, and some years they don't get much. But it's funny, I chased one storm in North Dakota, and the next thing I knew, I had a bunch of followers from North Dakota. So it's kind of like almost had like a little fan club up there. But it's fun to keep in touch with them because the storms up there have their own unique feel and look, which is different than what I would see here in Oklahoma, for example.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so this is a question that came up for me then as you're saying this. So because you do travel around to chase storms, what has to happen for that storm to pique your interest enough to go chase it?
Well, so that's the interesting thing with storm chasing is honestly, a lot of times I don't know what I'm getting into. So, for example, I'll start the day usually up pretty early. It could be 6 or 7 in the morning. I'm looking at the weather maps and deciding where to go. And a lot of times I'll go to an area and I'm just hoping to see a storm, or I go to one area and then a storm might develop a couple of hours away and I kind of have to bounce around. So the excitement with storm chasing is on any given day, you almost don't know what to expect. Sometimes there are cases where it's very specific. I know it's coming, but I would say more than half the time it's almost anybody's guess. And some days I go out there not expecting much and see fantastic storms. Other days there's all this excitement and hype and then nothing happens. So it keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, okay. So that makes sense where you're just checking the weather maps and it's awesome. So wait, does like everyone who chases storms, do they usually have a background in like meteorology or are they meteorologists like or are there some people who are out there who have like no understanding of the science or at least to the level that someone who studied it has and they just go out there for fun?
That's a good question. The storm chase community, it's very diverse. There's
Okay.
actually a lot of people who have almost no scientific background, but have kind of learned as they go along. And then there's some people who do have a background. For me, it's kind of interesting because I worked in TV as a meteorologist, and I actually left that to storm chase, where usually you have someone who might be a reporter that might stick with the station and do it, or you just have someone that would prefer to be behind the scenes and not be on TV. For me, I've gone back and forth a little bit, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And I will say one thing too, when I first moved to Oklahoma, even though I had the meteorology background, until you're actually under a supercell, a really intense thunderstorm, you don't really know what you're getting into. You can read all the textbooks you want, but until you're actually there and you're seeing it, even for me, I was awestruck, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a different, I mean, there definitely is the level of like having the theories and the understanding of the scientific, but then the experience of living it and seeing it in person. That makes sense. Um, okay, so since you do have the background of going back and forth between TV and storm chasing, like you currently actually have part of a show that you're a part of that's still running right now and it's Doomsday Caught on Camera. So can you share a little bit about like how that opportunity came about and what has been the most exciting part of being a part of that?
That was really interesting. I was actually traveling storm chasing this spring, and I got an email, and I get emails periodically, and sometimes it's hard to tell if they're spam or if it's actually legit. But
Yeah.
someone had reached out to me from the Travel Channel and had mentioned the show, and I kind of figured, okay, there's probably 20 or 30 candidates. They want to interview me, and we'll see where it goes. But I had one interview, and then they were very interested. And then after a second interview, they asked me if I'd want to be part of the show, and I jumped on that. And it was going into it, I didn't really know what to expect either because the pandemic was going on. The show had kind of been delayed, and they had to kind of restructure and change how the show was produced. So even before it started, it was almost anybody's guess how it was going to turn out.
Yeah. And so far you're enjoying the experience, and would you do it again?
I would, and it was a little bit different than what I expected. When I first came on, the show was kind of pitched to me as, well, Doomsday Caught on Camera. It's all these viral weather moments that are caught on camera. And then they brought on a bunch of commentators to kind of talk about it. But because it's a TV show, obviously they want to dramatize it a little bit. So when I first got into it, I was more focused on the scientific angle. But as we did a couple of episodes, I kind of got a feel for it. Because obviously for TV, there has to be some excitement, right? There's got to be some drama that goes along with it. So I kind of got a feel for it, and it really changed. Even though we only had 8 episodes, it really felt like there was a whole evolution process throughout the season, if you will. And after, like I said, at first it was very scientific. Then toward the end, I was definitely touching on explaining the science behind it, but also getting more into the drama and how each storm might feel like a doomsday situation. So it was definitely a lot of fun. I would do it again. I might do things a little bit differently, but as part of learning and growing, you kind of just go with the flow and you learn as you go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then also in quarantine, you wrote a book, right? Like you were just sitting down to just kind of write some thoughts, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it was interesting. Early in the pandemic, I mean, things were difficult because storm chasing involves a lot of traveling. And a lot of times, though, you're staying at hotels, you're stopping at maybe at stops, you're interacting with people on the road. So at first it was kind of like this gray area. What do I do? And for a while I found myself just at home with not much to do, no storms in the forecast. And in the span of about a week, I was just writing and almost writing for like almost an entire day for a few days. And I was just writing nonstop. And I thought about writing a book, and I kind of took a little bit of a step back and kind of it was almost like a series of blog posts, but could eventually turn into a book. But I've always liked writing, but I haven't really, when it comes to weather, I haven't really written a lot because it's kind of hard, right? Because I'm not really going from the fiction angle, but to write nonfiction about a storm, you either have to have a really good, like a dramatic story to talk about, or it's going to be just overly scientific. And I kind of wanted to take a step back and write about something that would be helpful for storm chasers, but not necessarily ones. It could be ones who are just beginning or wanting to get into the field. So I felt like that would be great to kind of share with the community.
Oh, that's awesome. And it is available for people to purchase, correct?
So it's not for purchase. I got a little bit of, I don't want to say heat, but some people questioned why are you releasing this and not selling it? And because for me, it's part of it was I don't want to say rush to put it together, but if I'm going to turn it into a book, there has to be more substance to it. Right now, it's basically almost like I don't want to say dummy's guide for storm chasing, but it's a guide for storm chasers, and it's available on my website. And hopefully next spring I may get into it with more detail. But for the time being, it's free access for anybody. I feel like that's a great way to kind of share the thoughts and my experiences with the community.
Oh, that's amazing, Quincy. So what's your website where people can go if they're listening and they want to get themselves a copy, or just check out your website in general?
Sure. So it's my name. It's quincyvagell.com. QuincyVagell.com. But if you just or if you Google Storm Chaser Q, all my websites and social media pop up right there. So that's kind of the easiest way to find me.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about, how, since you are on the road a lot, so how many days out of the year do you think that you're on the road, like on average?
So I really started doing this, and I don't want to say full time, but I started doing this regularly in 2014. And over the course of the storm season, which is usually spring and summer, I think on average, I'm anywhere between 60 and 70 days on the road. Now, there will be some stretches where I'm on the road for 2 weeks straight, or it could just be a one-off and then I'm home for a week and then wait for the next storm. But yeah, I would say between April and July, almost any other, like in any given week, I'm usually on the road for probably 3 or 4 days in the week.
Okay. So have you found that storm chasing in general, because to me that would seem kind of more like a dangerous hobby because storms can be unpredictable, and I don't know, I feel like that could be kind of scary sometimes. Do you feel like that, or do you think like, nah, that's just a misunderstanding?
Well, it definitely can be scary, and I still to this day there'll be times where I'm chasing a storm or watching a storm, and part of me realizes there's a real danger with it. I would say my first year of storm chasing, 2014, a lot of times I was getting a little bit too close for my own good, but I learned a lot, and thankfully nothing bad happened. But now that I have the more experience under my belt, I'm able to get great pictures, but also keep a safe distance, or simply be on the safe side of a storm. Because sometimes a storm you could be within a couple of hundred yards away from it, but you have to be on the opposite side, right? So if it's moving toward the east, you want to be looking at it from the west side. Or if you know what direction it's going, you want to kind of parallel it. So I think I've gotten to a point where it's pretty safe. Now, because you had said sometimes storms are unpredictable, sometimes they can change direction. You could be underneath a storm and then stray hailstones could be flying away miles away from the storm itself, or lightning can strike sometimes 15 or 20 miles away. So there's always a risk. But for me, it's walking that line where I'm able to get close, get great photographs and video and experience the storm, but also be in a safe spot where I'm not putting myself in danger.
I like that. Okay, so because I'm asking that question because, well, I'm curious in general anyway, but then also like, how is dating while you're on the road, and like even just maintaining friendships and relationships, and like, is your mom worried about you storm chasing? Like, how do you navigate all of that while still doing what you're very passionate about?
So there's a lot to unpack there, but let me talk. So when it comes to obviously my family, they know what I do, and they support me. At first, they were very, very fearful. Like, why are you moving to Oklahoma? There's bad storms out there. Do you know where you're getting into? But now that they've seen the footage that I share with them and the stories I've told them, they support it, but they're still definitely on edge. And when there's a storm that makes national news, I'll get a phone call or a text message almost right away. Are you okay? Or were you there? And it's encouraging that I get that support, but they're also looking out for me. When
Yeah.
it comes to friendships, there's a great storm chase community, and sometimes I'll bump into other storm chasers while I'm storm chasing, or we'll interact on social media and discuss where we're going. But for the most part, it's really, for me, it's a very solo thing. I go out there, I experience the storm. Sometimes I'll almost kind of shut down and distance myself a little bit. It's not that I'm cutting anyone off. It's that I'm so focused on the road, because safety is my number one focus. So if I'm on the road driving, some days I may drive between 600 and 1,000 miles in one day. So it's really focused on the road, and I put the phone down and I'm not really talking to people. But then there's that balance that once the storm's passed, I want to share my experiences. People reach out to me, they want to see how I'm doing. So it's a balance. And then when it comes to like romantic relationships and dating, that's an interesting thing, because it's tough. I know a lot of storm chasers who are married and their spouse may not be into storm chasing. So what those storm chasers do is they'll take what we call in the community a chasecation, which is like a vacation to chase storms. And it can be anywhere from a week to a month, but it can be very hard if you're not with whether it's your wife or husband, or your spouse or your significant other. You're on the road for weeks at a time. So that can be difficult. But there are a few great stories out there, almost like fairy tale stories, of people who maybe two storm chasers meet and they end up dating, and they end up, because they both have a passion for traveling and photography and storms, it can kind of bring them together. So it's really interesting. Like I said, I'm a lot of times I'm on the road alone, and I'm more of an introverted person. But when there's people who share common interests, that really grabs my attention, and that can kind of bring us together, even if we are several states apart. And I'll go back again to that story about North Dakota. I've made great friends all around the country, and maybe I chased a storm in their hometown, or maybe we passed each other, or maybe we both saw the same storm, and we've actually kept in touch years later. So for me, that's really rewarding to be able to make friendships with people all around the country, and we keep in touch.
That's really incredible, actually, to think about that. So I guess I was thinking or wondering if it's kind of a lonely passion, but it sounds like there's this incredible community that really supports each other and encourages each other and like shares helpful tips and information, and you really support each other. So it's not as lonely as it could be if you didn't have that.
Yeah, no, it's really great with social media. Obviously, has its pros and cons, but I think within like the storm chase community, or even just photographers in general, it really brings you together, and you're able to realize, like in a small town in Oklahoma, for example, there might be 10 storm chasers that live there, and the town might only have 100 people. So it's really neat to see in these smaller communities that there are a lot of people who are just as passionate as you are.
Yeah, that's incredible. So is that your hope that someday you'll have a partner that comes on this storm chasing with you, or would you be fine if they weren't interested and it was just continue to be your own thing?
That's something I've actually thought about a lot, and I listened to your recent podcast about being single over 30, and it's kind of interesting. I've gotten to a point where I'm happy being single, but at the same time, if I met someone who had a common interest, or if I met someone who was into similar things within weather or storm chasing or photography, it would be amazing to share that with somebody else. For the time being, I love to share it with just social media in general. But if I had someone that I could really connect with on another level, that would be special too. But I'm a very much go with the flow person. So it's kind of, if I were to get into a relationship in the near future, I would preferably be with someone who has similar interests, but not necessarily. Maybe in my own artistic way, maybe storms scare them, or maybe they don't like traveling, but maybe there's a way I can share that with them and still have that bond, whether it be photographs, or maybe I tell them a compelling story, or maybe even write a poem about a storm. I mean, I've done some writing in that respect as well. So lots of different possibilities, and I'm just open for whatever life throws at me.
Oh, I love that. That makes it so that, well, it sounds like like you said, you thought about it in all the different perspectives, and that it would be amazing to share this with somebody, but it's not a deal breaker if don't like traveling or they're scared of storms, because you've really thought of other ways you can involve them, which is really awesome. Is it very common for people who are into storm chasing also to be really into photography? Because I hear you um mentioning both of those a lot. So I guess it would make sense that people who are storm chasing are also into photography so that they can have the incredible photos.
There is a lot of overlap, but it's almost like, I don't want to say there's two separate communities, but it's almost like two different perspectives come together. And I've met a lot of great photographers who don't storm chase or don't know a lot about storms, but maybe they bumped into a storm or they saw one and they wanted to know more about it. But on the flip side, I know a lot of people who've done like more of the research angle, whether or when it comes to weather, have researched more of the science or the atmospheric component. And then they chase storms, but they don't chase it for the photo aspect necessarily. But then they kind of, over time, it's almost like they've kind of blended together. And that's what makes the community just so diverse and dynamic, is that there's two different elements to go into it. Some people are more interested in the photography aspect, some like more like science more. For me, it's almost like a 50-50 blend. Like it's almost, they really go together very well for me.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So I feel like you've kind of already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just in case you have more to add to it. But because you are on the road quite a bit, especially during spring and summer, which I feel like is usually, I guess this is true for you too. Usually spring and summer are the seasons that people just are so excited for. They can't wait for it because you get to go outside and enjoy all the nice weather, right? But you're like super excited because it's the storm season. So you're like, yes, I love spring and summer because I get to go chase these incredible storms. Would that be true for you?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, winter, it's funny. I grew up in New England, so I'm used to the cold weather and the snow. But as I've gotten older, I'm not as thrilled by a snowfall, or in the case of today, there's an ice storm that's in Oklahoma. So, but what I'm getting at is, through the winter, days are short, daylight's shorter, it's colder, and then once you start rounding the corner, once you get to February and March, and the days are getting longer, for a storm chaser, for someone like me, it's like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And the storm season sometimes begins as early as March, but usually it's April and May when it really gets going. And as winter transitions into spring, it's like a lot of people are looking forward to summer vacation or going to the beach or getting off of school. And for me, it's all about storms. Like I almost really have a one-track mind. It's kind of when it comes to spring, I'm so focused on the storm aspect of it. That's really, for me, that's the thrill of it. For me, being on the road for a week, traveling all across the country, looking for storms, that's like a vacation to me. So I definitely look forward to it.
I love that. So Quincy, you mentioned the ice storm that you guys had, which I would love you to talk about that for a second, just for anybody who's listening and never experienced an ice storm, like what that means and what that is. But before you do, like your photos on your Instagram are so pretty, even, because it's like the rose and then the kind of ice hanging off the fence. But the rose is so beautiful. And then the fence one is kind of tells the story of what an ice storm is. But can you, for anybody listening who's like, I've never experienced that, what is an ice storm?
Sure. So there's different types of winter storms, and I think most people they know about snowstorms, white snow. It's blankets the landscape. When it comes to an ice storm, there's different kinds of ice storms. An ice storm could be where you have these ice pellets that come down, or it's sometimes called sleet. But what I'm experiencing is an ice storm where it rains, but either the ground is so cold or the raindrops are super cooled, which means that they freeze on contact. So you have rain falling, and then all of a sudden it just freezes on contact. And the roads may look like black asphalt, we call it black ice, and it just becomes really slick. So ice storms can be very pretty when trees and branches and flowers get covered in ice, but there's also the danger element, because if you're driving, you may not know that it looks like it's raining, but it could be freezing rain, or it could be ice on the road surface. So that's a danger. But then also too, if you get too much ice, if the ice is too heavy, trees start falling down and they get knocked down, power lines. So ice storms can be pretty to look at, but they're no fun to drive in, and you don't want to really experience a bad one because you might lose power sometimes for days or even weeks.
Oh man. Yeah, and that is true. The black ice, like a lot of accidents. I remember in Montana, whenever there was black ice, it was always really scary. I was like, I'm not driving anywhere. I'm just gonna stay home. Okay, so this is one of the question I had wanted to ask, but I kind of sidetracked us all over the place because that's kind of what I like to do. But anyway, so how do you take care of your mental health while chasing storms? Because we mentioned how storms can be scary sometimes, or, to me, I think about how a lot of storms can be destructive, especially like tornadoes, right? Like tornadoes can, even though they may be very beautiful to see, like the funnels and all that stuff are just fascinating, but they can also have a lot of destruction that comes with them, especially in Oklahoma City or Oklahoma in general. So how do you keep your mental health? And this is where I'm saying, like, you kind of talked about it before, because you're so focused because safety is like your number one thing. And then you connect with people afterwards, which I think is like a beautiful balance, right? You're like, staying focused, getting the job done. And then you're like, you guys, look at this incredible experience I just had. So I think that's part of it. But can you share for anyone else who's listening that some of the tips that you use to take care of your mental health, because it might help someone else who's listening?
Sure, yeah. So when I'm out there, when I'm storm chasing, the ultimate goal is to see a storm, and I'd prefer to see it over open country or farmland, or over the mountains, or over something over the distance. And when it comes to, for example, Oklahoma City, it's kind of right in the center of Tornado Alley. I actually prefer to not chase storms that are near a metro area, because there could be a lot of damage and destruction. And unfortunately too, sometimes you get traffic jams, and if there's a storm coming and you're in that jam, you can't get out of the way. So really, for me, I go back to the safety aspect, and I try to avoid areas like that. But I'll tell a story. There was one time I was storm chasing in Nebraska, and it was Pilger, Nebraska, and they got hit by actually back-to-back tornadoes from the same storm. And seeing it up close and personal was very dramatic. And for me, it was thrilling. But then once it hit the town of Pilger, it was kind of a wake-up call. It was the first time I'd actually been in a town that had just recently been hit by a devastating tornado. And as I was driving through, I actually saw a mother holding her baby out by the side of the road, and I had to pull over and see what happened. And she was okay. They went into their I guess, into their safe space, as you would call it, their storm shelter, and they were just coming out to assess the damage, and they were okay, and their neighbors were okay. But for me, that kind of brought storm chasing to a different level. And some storm chasers will actually be out there, and they'll be the first responders.
Mm.
They'll go into towns that have been hit by tornadoes. Like first they'll document the storm, but then they'll go in there and they'll try to help with the cleanup process or the searching process. So I think it's really admirable of them. And even though I don't do that a lot myself, there are times where I see it either in social media, or maybe I chased a storm in the distance, and then little did I know that it hit a town. So it really hits home, and it makes you really think, and you value your own life that much more, but you also, your heart goes out and you want to help in any way that you can. And for me as a storm chaser, to kind of take a step back, part of why I do what I do is because I want to be able to give those firsthand reports. For example, if I'm storm chasing out in Western Kansas, I might be far away from the nearest city, and me seeing a storm, I might be the first person to see it. And if I could send that report to the National Weather Service, or if local media picks up on it, they can spread the word and hopefully issue warnings or prepare the public so that they can be prepared for the storm. So what I do, part of what I do is there's in the storm chasing community, some storm chasers said they save lives, and I don't want to say that I necessarily do that, but I would like to think that maybe I could potentially save a life or keep someone safe by giving my firsthand reports before the storm impacts them.
That's incredible, Quincy. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's when I first began storm chasing, it was a lot of this was very new to me, and I didn't really, in my mind, it was just, oh, I'm going to see a storm and photograph it. But then the more you think about it, storms can impact communities. They can cause damage and destruction. Like there's so much more that goes into it. And the fact that I could possibly give back and help out, that means a lot to me. And that's really part of why I do what I do. And as I'm sharing photographs, I always tag the town, or I'll give coordinates, or I'll give a location. That way, maybe someone who lives in that town sees it pop up, and then they realize, oh, I need to get to a safe space, or it's coming. Because it's hard for, in a lot of these rural communities, or even in Oklahoma, because they get so many storms, sometimes the community is a little bit desensitized to the storm itself, and they can't tell if the media is hyping up a storm or if there actually is a storm coming. So I try to help. And again, I'm not the end all. As one person, I can't save everybody, and I can't do as much as I would like to do. But even if it, like I said before, if it just helps one person or helps protect one person, then I feel like I've achieved something that's positive in what could otherwise be a negative situation.
No, that makes so much sense. Quincy, I think that's fantastic that, I mean, I never thought of it that way. Like when you're going out there, that it's actually providing information for the local area, and it's helping people stay safe, which makes so much sense. And it also makes sense when I do see your photographs that you really aren't in a city, they're always out in nature somewhere. And oh, that's so cool. I'm so glad we talked about that, because that was an aspect that I wasn't even thinking about. So thank you for the work you're doing, for putting yourself out there to help protect other people, and also just, I don't know, help us learn about storms more. And I think that's really important. So thank you.
Sure, and that's another thing that's happened too. Is I was storm chasing. Another quick little story. I was in Colorado in a rural area, just mostly farmland, and I was pulled off to the side of the road, just photographing the storm. And a couple of locals came by. I think they were farmers. Came up in a pickup truck, and we're asking about the sky or what was coming. And it's kind of neat to be able to share and teach and educate when I'm on the road. I mean, that doesn't happen a lot because usually I'm in these very rural areas and I don't really see a lot of people. But sometimes I'll have locals that will stop me. I've even had law enforcement. Because a lot of times, if you're in a small town, there's a sheriff. You might only have one sheriff, and if there's a storm warning, if there's a tornado warning, the sheriff goes out with the car and may go a few miles west of town to see what's coming. And sometimes I can kind of share with them and let them know what's happening. So that goes back to the rewarding aspect of storm chasing, is being able to share and educate and teach. And it's funny, in a parallel life, not even in a parallel life, I actually thought about in college possibly going into teaching at one point, because I do like sharing my knowledge and helping others learn and grow. So maybe I can't do that in a classroom capacity, but if I can do it, whether it be on social media or even on the side of the road with someone during a storm, again, I find that very rewarding.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, how have you learned to trust yourself and your instincts just while storm chasing? And even with like the photography, is it something that just comes with experience, or is it something that you developed by doing something else?
I think, well, I think a lot of it comes down to experience. So, like when it came to storms, when I first started chasing storms, I almost didn't really know what I was getting into, and I kind of just learned by doing. And with photography, my photography has really evolved over time. When I was younger, I just took pictures for fun. Then in college, I got my first semi-professional camera, and I was out kind of taking pictures. And then with storm chasing, when I first started storm chasing, I was more about just chasing the storm. But then over the time, I began to balance the photo aspect of it. And I think a lot of it is just a lot of it's just experience, being able to capture what looks the most interesting, what's a unique angle of a storm. But I think in different areas of life, you like whether it be relationships or friendships, you kind of learn what inspires people and what really gets them tick. So as a scientist, there may be a certain aspect of a storm that I find fascinating, but through my photography adventure, if you will, I've learned that there's certain structures of clouds that really captivates people. Or if a storm is spinning like a top, that's something that really captures people's attention because a lot of people have never seen a storm like that. So it really has evolved and it continues to evolve as I see different types of storms or if I interact with different storm systems. It's almost like kind of like, I don't want to say I'm learning as I go, but well, yeah, in a way I'm really learning because the way I approach it is it's evolving over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes so much sense. So is your car just like super filled up with everything as you're traveling and going to chase a storm? I mean, because I'm figuring you have to have like food. What if you need to sleep? What if like some hygiene stuff? Are you just like, is your car kind of your mobile hotel as you're doing this?
Yeah, yes, this is a good question. I'm glad you brought this up because it goes back to we asked about how do I keep like my mental health positive, but then how do you if you travel a lot, whether you're someone who's a storm chaser or a truck driver or someone who likes to go on road trips, if you're going to be in a car for a week or longer at a time, it's almost like you're living in your car. Now, for me, I do try to stop at hotels, but I do have stuff with me. I usually pack most of my own food because a lot of times on the road, all you get is like gas station food or tacos or something that's not really healthy. And I try to stay healthy on the road because when I'm driving long distances, for me personally, if I'm eating a lot of junk food, it brings my mood down. I lose energy, I lose stamina. And if I'm driving long distances and I need to be focused, I need to be eating relatively healthy. So I'll usually I'll pack fruit or like granola or energy bars and little things like that. That also, it saves time because I'm not stopping for food. It's a little bit healthier. It's probably a little bit cheaper too. So I do that. And I have to make sure that I am eating too. So sometimes I'll drive and I may have driven 6 hours and I haven't even eaten anything yet. And I'm like, okay, I need to stop and have something just so I'm staying alert and staying energetic. But definitely my car, it's a big part of me. I spend in an average year, I drive between 60 and 70,000 miles, which for the average person, that's like about 4 or 5 years worth of driving in a year. And I do that every year. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of time on the road. And I need to be comfortable and I need to be healthy and I need to make sure that I have everything that I need so I can stay safe um, and all that comes along with the traveling long distances.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you said a really good point that I think people often overlook is how important what we're eating, how that influences our mood and our mental health and how we're like what we're thinking, our energy levels, all of that. So that makes so much sense when you're in this like focus. Plus, I think also when you're just like so focused and you're doing something that does have risk to it, I think our adrenaline's going a little bit. So we burn through calories faster, all of that. So it's like having that healthy food to kind of refuel you versus just keep you full, I think is really important in the work that you're doing. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I think a lot of times that gets overlooked or we don't realize the connection and how important what we're eating is to our mood and our energy levels and our focus even.
No, and it definitely plays a big role. And I've been on trips where I've seen people storm chasers who've been driving. They've been on the road for weeks on end, and they stop me and they ask me, "How do you have so much energy?" And part of it's just that's just who I am. it's funny. I don't drink coffee. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm ready to go. I don't need the extra energy, but when you're driving those kinds of distances, eventually it does begin to impact you. And I try to be relatively healthy as I'm going along.
I love that. So, do you ever get lonely? And when you do, what do you do?
So that's a very good question. So when I'm storm chasing, a lot of times you said like the adrenaline's going. I could be on the road and I could be storm chasing. It could be 5, 6, 7 days in a row, and there's a storm every day. But eventually, it gets to a point where there's no storms, and I may be halfway across the country from where I live, and since I do most of my traveling driving, I can't just get on a plane and go home. And sometimes there may be times where maybe a little bit lonely or maybe a little bit disconnected. And for me, I kind of reconnect through nature. So if there's no storms and the weather's nice, I may go out for a walk or a hike, or I may stop to see like a national park or go out and see a waterfall or something to kind of spark my interest. Because for me, going back to, I'm a very introverted person, but when there's no storms and I'm far from home, there still needs to be something to fill that void. And part of it too is, like I said, I've met people around the country. So a lot of times if I'm storm chasing and I'm in the plains and let's say I get up into the Dakotas and there's no storms, I may try to meet up with someone that I know from North Dakota, for example, or I have some friends in Nebraska, and I'll try to kind of turn that trip into something where it's not just me. It's okay. There's no storms. Let's share that. Let's meet up with some friends, or maybe let's meet someone for the first time that we've been following each other. I've met a photographer that we were following each other for years, and we kind of bumped into each other in Nebraska, and then we ended up having a great conversation. It was so unexpected to kind of put someone behind that face you've seen on a screen, you know? So in a lot of ways, even though I'm on the road alone for a lot of the times, all it takes is that one moment, and it could just be a brief conversation in person. That's all that it takes to really just to brighten up a day. Especially if there's no storms to follow. It's for me. Some people might look at that as being a disappointment if there's no storms, but for me, I'll try to make the best of it. Either sightseeing, enjoying the outdoors, or maybe connecting with someone else on the road.
I love that. So it just sounds like taking care of yourself, like your mental health, your just individual. I like to say, I mean, mental health, because that's just like people, pretty much everybody understands what that means, you know? So it sounds like you just kind of have all of these little things that you're doing to take care of yourself, just kind of interwoven into your just what you do. And so
Sure,
that's
sure.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it's neat. I want to make it clear. I'm not the best or perfect at any of these things. There are some times, and even recently as this spring, where I may have a week off to chase storms, and let's say it was a very disappointing week, or maybe I missed the storms, and I would be kidding. I would be kidding myself if I didn't say that I was disappointed. And sometimes I do feel almost defeated because I've been on the road and I couldn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. But I always try to take the positives out of everything. So if I had a trip that was not successful, and maybe at the time I was very disappointed, when I get back home, I kind of flip it and look at it and see, okay, what did I do wrong? Or what can I do differently next time? And that kind of keeps, when it comes from like a mental health standpoint, I feel like I'm growing as a person. And even though I've been storm chasing for over 6 years now, I still learn almost every day. And I try to take the positives out of it and make me a better person, to have better interactions with other people, to build stronger relationships. So even though I almost have this one track mind on storms, there's a lot more that's going on up there. And I really try to embrace all the different aspects of traveling and the community and photography and storms. And it kind of hits home on a deeper level.
Yeah, I love that. That makes so much sense. And it's very true that we can feel disappointed by something and then we can process it and move through that disappointment and come out stronger on the other side of it. So I think
That's for sure. And I think sometimes some people lose sight of that, or it can be hard, because I'll be honest, earlier in my career or even when I was a younger adult, I feel like I took disappointment personally, where now I kind of, as I've gotten older and been more experienced, and kind of try to take the positives out of it more and not let things impact me personally. And even just like going back to the mental health standpoint, it's easy to get upset and disappointed or mad, but all it takes is one positive thought or switch in your thought process and just flip it, because life's too short to have negative emotions and be unhappy, at least in my mind. So I think being able to flip that and find positives can make life just that much more, or eliminate stress and just make life that much more enjoyable.
Mm, good point. It does help eliminate the stress, and you get to enjoy life more if you are able to find a way to eliminate the stress. I love that. So it sounds like you have really learned so much through storm chasing, just as a human. And so what is some of the takeaways that you've started applying to all areas of your life that you've learned while storm chasing, and even like photography even? So as you've kind of incorporated your passions into your life, and you actually carve out time to make sure that you get to honor these passions, and you get to like let them expand with you, what have you taken from the lessons you've learned there that you apply to your life in general?
Sure. So I think, like, when it comes to photography, it's interested in me for a very long time, but it wasn't until just recently that I was taking it to a more serious level, or maybe serious isn't even the right word. I think because I was growing and developing, I took what was just a little simple hobby, and it almost kind of turned it into, I don't want to say into a business, but I turned it into something that it's to a different level where I can make money off of it. I can share it with other people. It helps me grow because I'm learning, for example, about how storms develop and how storms form. Or I'm even learning more about culture and history. Like, there have been times where I've been on a road trip in Montana and there's no storms, and I've taken time to visit historical sites or photograph national parks or nature or wildlife. And then it kind of sparks me to I want to learn more about it. So it's not just, I took a picture of something. I took a picture of an experience or a memory, and then I've gone back and I've learned more about it. Like, how did it get there? Where is it going? Why is the dirt red in Oklahoma, for example? Or why is this animal in Montana? And it really gets you to really think about it on a deeper level, where it's not just a superficial, I took a picture of a storm. I actually learned about the community. And I've actually had cases where I've gone into these small towns and I've talked to locals, and they've told me stories about how they got to where they are, or a storm hit them, let's say 30 years ago, and they tell me what they learned from that storm. So it's a constant learning and growing process. And I think that makes it can make any hobby, whether it's, for me, photography or storm chasing, or I can't even imagine how many different hobbies you could apply that to. Just you have a hobby, but then you learn more about its history. You learn more about why it fascinates you, why it fascinates other people. And then you kind of learn, or you may learn, like, what's going to happen in the future with that. Like, how's it changing? So I think with any hobby, it's not that you have to do it. Some people just have a hobby and then they enjoy it. But I think to enjoy a hobby on a deeper level, that can make it even much more rewarding.
I love that. That makes so much sense. And it's really cool that you do that, that you really take time to really dive into the experience and take as much that you can out of it, because you're also giving so much more, you know? And then that can add into your stories and the history, and kind of tie in that emotional piece to the photos, more than just like, oh, this photo is incredible, but now I know a story. And so it also just helps other people learn about areas and different locations in the history and culture. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's definitely cool. And part of it goes back to, like I said before, I'm introverted, and I do have friendships and relationships, and I do enjoy interacting with the community. But for me, to learn about a geographic area, or learn about a storm, or learn about photography, those things, they really, because I'm very analytical, if that makes sense, and I like to break down and analyze things, and that's how I learn. But then I also use that to kind of share with others. So I try to take what's a very personal thing for me, but then, for the lack of a better term, share it with the world. And that's what makes it, another thing that makes it really rewarding for me, is being able to share what I've learned or seen or experienced with other people.
That's so cool. Okay, so you've mentioned you're introverted. What do you think is one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have about introverted people?
I know for myself personally, I'm relatively quiet. Like, if I'm in a setting, or at a party, or at an event or gathering, or even in a classroom or almost anything, I'm usually the quiet one. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Either I'm thinking and analyzing, or or I'm assessing a situation, observing. But I'm very, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I feel like a lot of introverts, they're just quiet because that's how they process things. It may take them a little bit of time to see what's going on, and then they want to share, or then they want to speak, or then they want to ask questions. I know for me, I ask a lot of questions too, and some people might be annoyed by that, or they might wonder, like, why do you ask so many questions? But that's how I learn. Some people learn by doing things. Some people learn by people showing them things. For me, I learn a lot by asking questions, or seeking answers. So even though I may seem quiet or disconnected, that's just a different way of how me and other introverts, I would like to think, that's how they learn, or that's just how they handle situations. And they may be quiet. Maybe it takes some time to open up. Maybe they have to have that comfort level first. A lot of extroverts, they'll be the life of a party, or they'll meet somebody new and they'll just be very outgoing and talkative right from the start. So I tell people sometimes that they ask, why are you so quiet, or what's wrong? And I just explain, there's actually nothing wrong. I'm, as an introvert, I'm just observing. I'm taking time to learn and grow and understand. And then once I have questions, or then once I feel comfortable, then I can open up a little bit.
That is a fantastic point. Being quiet does not equal that you're having a bad time. It can, like, you could be having a great time, but you're just taking it in.
Exactly. And sometimes when I'm very focused, whether it's storm chasing or driving or reading or anything, I might have a look on my face, and people would ask, are you upset or is something wrong? And for me, I'm just very focused. I think that's another thing that it's also similar to the quiet thing, because a lot of times I'll be quiet and I might have a look on my face, and people might be doubly concerned, but I try to reassure them, no, that just means that I'm very focused and I'm taking everything in, and it's not a bad thing.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is a very common, from my experience of hearing other people, talking, when there is an introverted person, if they are sitting back, people will ask them a lot, like, what's wrong? Are you not having fun? What's happening? And they're like, what? I'm just being me. I'm having a good time over here, but I'm going to experience it differently. And I think sometimes when we talk about this and let other people know, it helps them hear it from a different perspective and be like, oh, okay, so they really were having a good time. And because I think people really want to make sure when they're hanging out with people that everyone's having a good time. And sometimes we can put that in a lane that looks like, okay, if you're having a good time, it has to look this way. And then we miss out on, letting people just enjoy it the way they enjoy it.
No, that's true too. And I'll go back briefly to about how I travel a lot. And when I tell people I might be driving 6 or 10 hours for a storm, they might say, oh, isn't that boring? Or don't you get tired of the ride? Or why would you want to go so far? And for me, I don't mind being in a car that long, just because of, again, going back to the introverted piece. As I'm driving, I'm taking in nature, I'm hearing the sounds, and I'm seeing the sights. Or I might be reminiscing. I might be driving through an area that I've driven through before, and it brings back memories. So what might seem like a long, desolate drive, for me, it's sparking my imagination, because it's bringing up memories, or I'm seeing something new, or I'm driving through an area that's totally new, and then I want to learn more about it, and then I have questions, and I want to go out and seek the answers to them. So going back to the introverted person, we process and see things differently, and it doesn't mean that we're bored, or that we're not having a good time, or that we're lonely. It's just that we have a different thought process there.
I love it. And so, Quincy, do you have time to do a quick lightning round with me?
Sure, of course, Steph. Let's do it. It'll be fun.
Okay, cool. So your go-to song when you get in the car, what's the song you like to hit on your radio or your iTunes or whatever it is you listen to? Go-to song.
So, my favorite band is Pink Floyd, and I would say the song "Time" for me really speaks to me in a lot of different reasons. It's an upbeat song that can be a good traveling song, but also "Time," it makes me think about the past, the present, and the future, and it's kind of on a deeper level. Like when I listen to music, a lot of times it's the lyrics that really bring me into it, and I would say "Time" by Pink Floyd is probably my go-to song.
Love it. I'm also a lyrics person. Like it doesn't necessarily matter about the genre of the music or the beat or any of that stuff, but if the lyrics are good, I will always put that song on my playlist. So I'm a lyrics person too. What
Awesome.
is something that is underrated?
Something that's underrated. That actually, this goes kind of back to me and back to a recent podcast from you. I think being single or being alone, I don't want to say being alone, but I think being single is underrated. Not that being with someone's not can be really amazing as well, but I think having or maybe a better way of putting it is just having alone time or being with yourself, because you can learn a lot about yourself, your surroundings. You can learn more about yourself to make yourself better for your next relationship. So I think having time for yourself, that's underrated.
That's fantastic. That is so true. We do need to have time to ourselves. Love it. Okay, best advice you've received.
That I think it was funny when it was this quote was said to me a while ago, and I don't think I fully processed it at the time, but they said the best things or well, I guess there's a couple quotes. Best things come to those who wait. Because the original quote was good things will happen. I had a boss tell me this a long time ago, and I thought to myself, I'm like, well, what does that really mean? You kind of have to, and then, but I think that ties into the other quote, good things come to those who wait. So having patience, not, I know in this, especially in this day and age, everyone wants instant gratification, or they want likes, or they want to be liked. And I think having a little bit of patience and just being able to wait, and maybe you have to fight for something, or maybe you have to grow as a person before you can achieve that relationship that you've always wanted. So I think having the patience and being able to wait for good things, but on the flip side, also being proactive and not just waiting a whole lifetime, right? So I would say best things come to those who wait is advice that's really spoken to me.
Love it. What's your go-to drink?
My go-to drink. So, and this is part in my journey in my life. I'm making this like a really long-winded answer, but so actually water is like my go-to drink. But because I used to drink a lot of soft drinks or a lot of fruit juice or a lot of sweet drinks, and water for me is it's helped me in my weight. I've lost a lot of weight, not recently, but earlier in my life. So it's also very cleansing. I feel hydrated. I'm not drinking something that's going to make me more thirsty, or something that's going to make me feel like I don't really drink caffeine because I have the energy. So I always go back to water, and it could be sparkling water, it could be flavored water or seltzer, but usually water is like my go-to. I probably drink water probably 80 to 90% of the time when I'm staying hydrated.
I love that. Water is delicious. And
It
if
is.
you were stuck on an island, what do you bring with you?
How many things am I? Let's limit this to a certain amount of things. How many? Maybe 3 or 5 things. How many things can I bring?
Okay, let's say you're going to bring 3 things and you're going to be there for at least 6 months.
Okay, great. So I'm on an island for 6 months, and what do I bring? Obviously, I'd want to bring clothes so I can have that. I would say a lot of people would say their phone. I would actually say I would not bring my phone. I want to disconnect. So no phone. So I'd bring clothes. I'd say I'm kind of bring the basic elements. I'd want to have food, because if I'm on an island, I don't know if is it a deserted island. Is there anything that I'm going to be able to eat? I'd say food, clothes, and if I had to bring something else, I'd bring my camera so that I could take in and capture all the sights, whether it be wildlife or the ocean or the sunset. So those are the 3 things.
I love that. And if you needed to write yourself a note, you could write it in the dirt or something and then take a picture of it with your camera. And then you have the memory of what you needed to say or the cool thought you had.
That's true. I could write it in the dirt or the sand or something.
Yes. Okay, what is the best purchase you made in the last year?
This is going to be really silly, but actually buying a washer and dryer for the first time, I kind of joke that as an adult, you've known you've hit adulthood when appliances like bring joy to your life, but having a washer and dryer, honestly, within the past year, was probably my best purchase. Now, and prior to that, my last camera I bought was about 2 years ago, and that was a big upgrade. So in terms of more specific to my career and stuff, I would say the camera would be the previous most important or most impactful and purchase in my life.
I love that. Okay, so now I'm going to tweak that question a little too, just to see if you have anything. This is a question that Tim Ferriss asks all of his guests, but he says, what's the best purchase you've made in the last year under $100?
That's a good question. What is the best purchase I've made? So actually, I bought a painting, and this business was going out of business, and I had a bunch of artwork that was on sale. And because normally I don't, when I decorate my place, usually I do my own photographs because I don't want to spend a lot of money on pictures unless something really captures my mind. But there was a picture of beach and palm trees and an ocean really spoke to me. And because it was under $100, I jumped on it. It's almost like a 20 by 30 painting. And it really, cause I love the beach and the ocean, and it really spoke to me. And it's something I could share. And it's not my own personal art, but it's definitely a way how I can express myself.
I love that you said that the picture captured your mind versus captured your eye. That's so cool. That really stuck out to me. I was like, I love that. Okay, so now this doesn't necessarily have to be a fast answer, but I'm just curious if you have any fun projects that you're working on right now that you'd like to share with us.
Let's see, is there a fun project that I am working on? So a lot of times in the off season, I'll kind of do almost like a recap or a reanalysis of the storm season and things I learned, things I did well, things I want to do differently for next year. And that's something I'm actually going to be starting soon. I usually do that like in the winter months. It gives me something to do when it's cold and I don't want to go outside and I'm inside, and I kind of look back at my storm season. So that's coming up soon, and I'll usually share that. It's kind of like my thing I'll share usually either at the end of December or early in January, just kind of share like a year in review, if you will, and things I want to do for the upcoming storm season.
Ooh, I love that. A year in review and what's next. Okay, so Quincy, where can people find you?
So and when it comes to social media, really my biggest two avenues would be Instagram and Twitter. And honestly, I think Instagram is probably the best way to find me. I'm Storm Chaser Q anywhere. It's the same on Instagram and Twitter, but Instagram's really the place where I'm the most active. If it's not storm season, I still try to share pictures from time to time. I'll post stories about what I'm doing and things that maybe aren't as like I'm not capturing photos necessarily, but there's things in my life that are either important to me or that stood out to me. Like for example, just taking a picture of the ice storm. Those are things I like to share. So Instagram's probably the best, and then Twitter, I'm the most active during the storm season.
Okay, awesome. So I guess last question. Can people hire you for like photography or for a speaking event or for some sort of, I don't know, do people hire you for storm chasing information or stuff? Like, can people reach out to hire you for anything?
Yes, I love public speaking. It's funny. It's something that actually like is even as recently as high school and early in college, public speaking traumatized me, but I actually embraced it. And in some of my past work experiences, I've done public speaking. I've spoken to schools, I've spoken to students about weather or about meteorology or storm chasing. So I'm definitely open to, and I've shared my research at a couple of different conferences. So I'm definitely, when it comes to public speaking and sharing, I'm definitely able to do that. In terms of photography, I'm trying to branch out more and do more people photography. I've done a little bit of modeling recently, not a whole lot, and it's something that I'm still learning or growing with, but I'm open to learning and sharing either what I know or what another photographer or model might have in terms of knowledge base. And then when it comes to storm chasing, I am a freelance storm chaser. So sometimes I'll have news networks, like I've had CNN or the Washington Post contact me, and then they want footage or they saw footage that they would like to purchase from me. And I do that as well. So there definitely are ways I can share either my talents or expertise or even sell some of my work. And that's always rewarding for me to be able to share that, because if a station wants to buy my work, then it must be very impactful, because storm chasing right now, everyone has a smartphone and everyone has a device. And the fact that a picture I took is that impactful and someone wants to purchase that means a lot to me, and I want to be able to share that.
I love that. So basically, if you're curious about hiring Quincy for something, send him a DM or an email and let him know. Like, is there a way to contact you through your website?
Yeah, so on my website, quincyvagell.com, there's a contact form. If you look at either about me or contact me, that might be the easiest way, and it has my email on there as well. So, and any of my social websites, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, you could send a DM, you could even tweet me or send a comment. whatever is most comfortable for you, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to possibly collaborate.
Awesome. Well, Quincy, this has been so delightful. I really appreciate your time and just sharing your experience and just your thoughts with me. This was really fun. I feel like I got to know you more, and I have even before I thought storm chasing was cool, but now I have like a deeper appreciation for it. So thank you for your time and sharing.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks,
Yes.
Steph. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and you even got me to learn more about myself and things that I hadn't even really thought that much about. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. And make sure to share this episode with someone and leave a review. And remember, you're worthy of incredible love.